Hey, what's up, everyone? Today we're going to talk about Quora, and we're going to talk about some Quora questions, and this is just a bit of banter and talking between us. So the first question is, after Adolf Hitler, who is the worst dictator of all time? And this can be talked about in several categories. Of course, you would have the sheer incompetence categories, of course, with the dictators who didn't really want to kill so many people. And you just have the dictators who were cruel and tried to kill as many people as possible. So yeah, let's just first start off. One of the more incompetent dictators, more egotistical dictators, and this is mostly going to be from the last 200 years, because the most widespread and the most widespread and the biggest casualty counts, of course, were from the last 200 years. So first of all, Mao Zedong, incompetent leader. The Great Leap Forward killed between 20 to 60 million people, which is a unfathomable amount of people. It's insane. It's like thrice how many people live in my own country. So thinking of one person or one leader being able to absolutely decimate my entire country's population is insane. They would have Joseph Stalin. Of course, the only redeeming factor of Joseph Stalin is him having eventually, together with the United Kingdom, Canada, United States, Australia, those countries, having defeated Hitler. Yet it wasn't really voluntarily. Joseph Stalin's country, so the Soviet Union, got invaded by Hitler. It was not like Joseph Stalin actually did any offensive moves to Hitler to actually defeat him. If anything, he was actually more, in the early years, sympathetic to Hitler because of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and the Non-Aggression Pact he made with Germany. Of course, killing 6 million Ukrainians, 1.5 million Kazakhs, and a lot more people throughout the entirety of the Soviet Union, which probably aren't documented as well. During Holodomor, between 1930 and 1933, the significant amount of purchase. So yeah, you can make up your own mind on that one. Personally, for me, it's gonna be Joseph Stalin. Other worthy mentions are King Leopold II, specifically the second. What he did to the Congolese people, I believe 10 million people killed, chopping off hands, mass slavery, a lot of that people, absolutely horrible. Idi Amin, you have Pol Pot with Cambodia. I believe in 3 years or 4 years, I believe he killed a lot of people. You can even say Caligula, you can say Nero. Those are early Roman emperors, of course. I wouldn't really say Elagabalus, also from the Roman Empire. He was more like really insane, but he didn't really do as much damage because he was more of a puppet governor. There are a lot of people which killed a lot of people. You can also say Genghis Khan, of course. Incredibly cruel ways of conquering lands. So yeah, you can just pick whatever, and there isn't really a wrong answer. I think after Adolf Hitler, a lot of names come up, which my choice would be Joseph Stalin for sure. Yeah. So the next question is, what's one of the most stupid deaths in history? And you can answer this in two ways, right? Most stupid for me, which I dislike the most, or one of the dumbest deaths. So this may sound harsh, but one of the dumbest deaths was Frederick Barbarossa drowning in a very shallow river in modern day Turkey. Just face down, not being able to stand up, drowning, death. Pretty sad. Of course, this severely hampered the Third Crusade. I believe a third of its army actually left back to its homeland, with another third actually arriving to the point of destination. So that severely hampered the success of the Third Crusade. On the other hand, you would have Michiel de Ruiter, which is a country's hero for my country, the Netherlands. And him dying, I believe, 5 years or 4 years after the start of the Third Anglo-Dutch War, or I believe 4 years after the disaster year, or in Dutch het rampjaar, was really a treasure lost for a country. Of course, there are a lot of bad things people did around the time. I believe it's the 17th century, so go figure. But actually, Michiel de Ruyter used his own money and church money to also free slaves in North Africa, Christian slaves, I must add, because actually, very interestingly, the Netherlands, up until a certain point, before we actually got a bit of Africa coastal territory, which we captured from Portugal, was actually always really against using Christian slaves. I believe in the late 16th century, we actually just turned that opinion around and started also to use Christian slaves. So, but Michiel de Ruyter was one of the few people who actually decided to keep to that. So, no Christian slaves, try to free as many Christians as possible, stuff like that. And he actually used his own money. So, like I said, was he perfect, especially for the time? No, absolutely not. But to our country, it was a treasure. So, to me, one of the most stupid deaths. So, the next question is, what kind of execution methods make you still terrified? So, there are a couple of examples. When I was younger, I was interested in this. And let's start off, of course, with the blood eagle. Everyone knows it, mostly employed by the Vikings. They use an axe, they open up your back, and then they take out the lungs, and then you've become an eagle. You also have this one where they stick like a big rat cage on top of you. They put a rat in it, they heat up the cage, so the rat has to flee, and it digs its way out through your body. That one really sounds awful. You had this one case in Nanking where soldiers would throw babies and they would try to catch them with machetes. That one sounds really awful. Also in Nanking, you would have these dogs, and they would literally just tell them to rip you apart. That one is really awful. You would have Vierdelen in the Netherlands during the 17th century. Of course, we're going back to that every time because, well, I've been researching that a lot. But those would be just 4 horses tearing you apart. That one is really awful. Yeah, there's so many pigs there. They all sound awful. So the next question is, what's one of the coolest speeches in history? And this one has a lot less to do with history than just my personal preference. But my personal preference is that one video of that cop calling out a couple of gang members and saying like, I'm easy to find, and calling for not racial discrimination, and that he has like every single leader of the black community also next to him, and he's like, yeah, we need to save our streets and stuff like that, and come find me to the gang members. I find that so cool and so badass that he did that. Yeah, that's one of my favorite videos, or one of my favorite speeches. So the next question is, what's the most interesting era of history? And this is actually pretty difficult for me, because I really like the Mesozoic, of course, the dinosaurs, with the Ankylosaurus being my favorite of all time. I haven't really gotten any fatigue since I was young from dinosaur facts, though I've never really been interested enough to extensively research dinosaurs, so there's that. You of course have the Greeks to a lesser extent than the Romans. I find the Romans more exciting to research, especially like Aurelian, especially like Aurelius, especially like Trajan, Hadrian, Nerva, those emperors, very interesting. Constantine. Then I also really like the Dutch War of Independence, so the 80 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. Let's see, what more? I do also really like the Second World War. The Second World War, very interesting. Of course, that's what got me all started with all of this. YouTube, with speaking a lot of English, but also battlefields, analytical stuff. Yeah, World War II holds a very special place in my heart. And I think after that maybe like the Napoleonic era. Very interesting as well. Very dynamic, very evolutionary, not as much as World War II of course, but very interesting nonetheless. So it's very hard for me to make a decision, but if I had to make a decision, probably the Roman Empire for now. So the next question is, what's your favorite ruler in Dutch history? And this might be a very difficult question. I got 4 answers for you. So let's start off with the first one. The first one, William the Silent. Arguably the most well-known Dutch person in Dutch history, especially to us. The Vader des Vaderlands, he's also called, so like the father of the fatherland, I believe direct translation. Even though he had less influence than we'd like to imagine, still symbolically the most important person ever in our country. Then you would have Maurice of Orange, which is a military man, of course, the dictator of the Netherlands, or sort of dictator for more than 25 years of the Netherlands. He was able to push the Netherlands partially into the Golden Age. After that you would have Frederik Hendrik, which succeeded Maurice of Orange. He was able to capture key cities in the Netherlands like Den Bosch, with he was able to drain like 40 kilometers of swamp, which is insane. A very, very clever tactical and engineering mind for that time. Absolutely amazing. And then lastly you would have King Lodewijk. King Lodewijk installed by Napoleon Bonaparte in the Netherlands in 1806 as the monarch. Of course, at first he is very much despised, but over the time he proved himself to the Dutch citizens. For example, coming there once there was a big explosion in Leiden. He came there to the affected and he said, hey, you guys can take a rest at the palace, we're here for you. People started to respect him a lot more. He also refused increased taxes from France. He said, no, we're not going to do that to the Dutch people. And increased conscriptions. I'm sorry, I want to say subscriptions, but conscriptions. He refused that as well. Until eventually in 1810 he was ousted by his brother, I think. And he was forced to flee to Austria. Eventually he was able to return, I believe some 30 years later, but then by then he was a very old, very sick man, looking at the Netherlands for one last time from his carriage. He was maybe there for a couple of days to at most a week, under anonymity, so nobody really knew who he was or was supposed to know. But once he looked outside of his carriage, some people recognized him and started to cheer and wave. So yeah, that's really positive for him, of course. And even in his later days, he was always just writing to our country, like, best people of the Netherlands, I miss you so much, stuff like that. So it's a really sad story because he was never allowed to return. Partially because of the monarchs feared a former, even if it was installed, but former monarch. So yeah, they didn't want to let him return, especially Willem I. So that was pretty sad. But yeah, King Lodewijk for me, honorable mention for sure. So take your pick. If I would have to choose, probably my favorite is Maurice of Orange. But all the other three I find really great answers as well. So the next question is, what is the greatest historical leader in human history? So that's going to be a difficult question, right? Because what kind of leader? A political leader, a military leader, both of them. Though I do have quite limited political leader knowledge, I'll just say Augustus, great leader, of course, also very good with propaganda. But I'll just keep it at that because I don't want to make mistakes. I'm not going to feed you mistakes and I'm just going to say, hey, I don't know stuff. I'm going to be fair about it, right? I think military leader, I think Aurelian is probably one of my top picks, considering he restored the Roman Empire in 5 years. I actually made a full video on it, so I think you can check it out here. I'm going to link it up here. He restored the Roman Empire in 5 years. He was able to defeat 2 breakaway states, so the Gallic Empire and the Palmyrene Empire, in a very short time. He was putting through reforms, both religiously, taxation, taking care of the sick and the weak, stuff like that. So to me, great leader. Sadly, he of course got murdered by his own men at the Bosporus Strait. once he wanted to go on a expedition to Persia. So that's, yeah, longevity isn't there, but still great leader, great historical feats. And there are a lot of other great. So the last question is actually kind of hard, because the question is, if you could remove a single person from history, doesn't matter who, you can remove literally everyone you want. If you could remove a single person from history, who would you choose? And of course, the very easy answer is, of course, I would remove Hitler. Okay, but assuming you remove Hitler in 1933, right? That means someone of the SA or the SS would get into power. Maybe they're more competent than Hitler, they kill more people. Assuming you remove Joseph Stalin, right? Okay, Lev Trotsky becomes the leader. Trotsky, who arguably in his ideology is worse than Stalin, becomes the leader of the Soviet Union. That doesn't sound that good either. Assuming you can remove the guy that killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Gavrilo Princip. Does that mean you avoid the First and Second World War? Or would Austria-Hungary and Serbia have gone to war anyway and everyone joined in anyway because they wanted to go to war anyway? So it's impossible to know. So the easiest answer would be, of course, just remove Hitler. But yeah, even then, you don't know if history would literally turn out the same anyway. So yeah, very difficult to answer. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one, if I make one soon. And have a great day. Ciao, ciao.